The day Camilla Brooks signed her marriage certificate, she calculated exactly how much her dignity was worth, and the number had 12 zeros. She stood in the marble-floored courthouse that Tuesday morning, wearing a simple cream dress she'd bought on sale, while her new husband, tech billionaire Zachary Whitmore, checked his phone throughout the entire 5-minute ceremony. His jaw was tight, his eyes were cold, and when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Zachary turned his head so her lips caught only the corner of his mouth. The photographer hired by his family captured it anyway, the perfect image of a lie. But Camilla didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She simply smiled for the camera, thanked the officiant, and walked out into the San Francisco sunshine with her new husband trailing 3 steps behind her, already on a call with someone who mattered more than she did. Because Camilla had learned a long time ago that tears changed nothing. Numbers, however, numbers changed everything. If you've ever felt invisible to someone who was supposed to see you, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a like and comment below where you're watching from. Let's build a community of people who know their worth. Now, let's continue. The arrangement was simple, clinical, spelled out in a contract thicker than a dictionary. Zachary's grandmother, the formidable Patricia Whitmore, had built the Whitmore empire from a single hardware store into a technology conglomerate worth $43 billion. On her deathbed, she'd added one final clause to her will. Zachary would inherit his full share only if he married within a year of her passing and stayed married for at least 5 years. A marriage of substance, the lawyers called it. A punishment, Zachary called it. An opportunity, Camilla's mother called it. Camilla called it survival. She was 28 years old, a financial analyst with a modest apartment in Oakland and student loans that felt like chains around her ankles. Her parents had immigrated from Trinidad when she was 5, worked 3 jobs between them, and still struggled to keep their tiny house in East Bay. When the Whitmore's matchmaker, yes, they actually hired a matchmaker, approached her with the proposal, Camilla's first instinct was to laugh. Her second instinct was to ask about the prenuptial agreement. The number in that prenup was life-changing. Stay married for 5 years and she'd walk away with $20 million, enough to pay off her loans, her parents' mortgage, and set up funds for her younger brother's medical school. Enough to start the nonprofit she'd always dreamed of, helping immigrant families navigate financial systems designed to keep them poor. Enough to never feel small again. So she'd said yes to a man who looked at her like she was a stain on his custom Italian suit. The Whitmore mansion sat in Pacific Heights, a sprawling estate with more rooms than Camilla could count in her first week there. Zachary set the rules on day 1. She would have her own wing. They would appear together at family functions and necessary social events. In private, they were strangers. He would live his life. She would live hers. The only thing they shared was a last name and a calendar alert for mandatory appearances. "Don't mistake this for something real," Zachary told her the night she moved in, standing in the doorway of her designated bedroom, a beautiful prison decorated in whites and grays that felt like living inside a cloud. "You're here because my grandmother had outdated ideas about family. I'm here because $43 billion is worth 5 years of inconvenience. We both know what this is." "A business transaction," Camilla finished, meeting his ice-blue eyes without blinking. "I'm aware." Something flickered in his expression, surprise maybe that she hadn't tried to protest or play the wounded bride, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Good, then we understand each other." He left without another word, and Camilla unpacked her modest collection of belongings into the walk-in closet that could have housed her entire Oakland apartment. She hung up her 7 dresses, her 3 pairs of shoes, her single winter coat. The emptiness of that closet felt like a metaphor she didn't want to examine too closely. That night, alone in her new bedroom with its 1,000 thread-count sheets and view of the Golden Gate Bridge, Camilla opened her laptop and created a spreadsheet. 5 years equaled 1,825 days. $20 million divided by 1,825 days equaled 10,958.9 per day. She was earning roughly $456.62 per hour just by existing in this house. The numbers were comforting. The numbers made sense. The numbers kept her from thinking about the look on Zachary's face when he'd turned away from her kiss. The months that followed established a routine. Zachary left before she woke up, came home after she'd retreated to her wing, and on the rare occasions they passed each other in the halls, he nodded like she was an employee he vaguely recognized. His parents visited twice in the first 3 months. His mother, Vivienne, all sharp edges and sharper judgment. His father, Richard, mostly silent behind his newspaper. They inspected Camila like she was a piece of furniture they hadn't chosen but were stuck with. "You're very dark," Vivienne said during her second visit, sipping tea in the sunroom while Camila tried to make conversation. The word hung in the air like smoke. Zachary's previous girlfriend was a lovely blonde girl, very appropriate, very connected. "I see," Camila replied, keeping her voice steady even as something hot and angry coiled in her chest. "Nothing personal, of course," Vivienne continued, setting down her teacup with a delicate clink. "It's simply that the Whitmores have a certain image, a certain standard. I'm sure you understand." Camilla understood perfectly. She understood that in Vivienne's world, her brown skin was a flaw to overlook, not a feature to see. She understood that she would never be enough for these people, no matter how she dressed or spoke or smiled. But she also understood that Vivienne's opinion couldn't touch the number in her prenup, so she smiled wider and offered more tea. That night she added a new column to her spreadsheet, indignities endured. She didn't assign a dollar value to it. Some things couldn't be quantified. Still watching? Then you're part of this journey now. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next. Drop a comment telling me where you're from. I read every single one. Now back to Camilla's story. 6 months into the marriage, Camila found her rhythm. She kept her job at the financial firm downtown, commuting an hour each way because it gave her something that was hers alone. Her colleagues didn't know she was married to Zachary Whitmore. To them, she was just Camila, the woman who brought homemade roti to office potlucks and stayed late to help junior analysts with their Excel formulas. She sent money home to her parents every month, not too much because she didn't want to explain where it came from, but enough to ease some of their burden. She had dinner with her best friend, Jasmine, every Tuesday at their favorite Ethiopian restaurant, where they'd laugh over injera and commiserate about life's absurdities. Jasmine knew about the arrangement. She was the only one. "Girl, you're living in a mansion with a fine man who ignores you," Jasmine said one Tuesday, shaking her head. "That's some fairy tale in reverse." "The princess locked herself in the tower," Camilla replied, spearing a piece of Doro Wat. "Turns out the prince was the dragon all along." But dragons, as it turned out, were more complex than fairy tales suggested. It was month 8 when Camilla first saw the crack in Zachary's armor. She'd come home early from work. Her mother had called in tears because the landlord was threatening eviction despite their rent being current, and Camilla couldn't focus, and found Zachary in the library, a room she'd assumed was just for show. He was sitting in one of the leather armchairs, staring at a photograph in his hands, and he didn't hear her come in. The photograph showed a younger Zachary with an older woman who could only be his grandmother. They were at the beach, both laughing, sand in their hair, joy captured in a frozen moment. The Zachary in that picture looked nothing like the man Camilla had married. That Zachary looked free. "She used to take me to Ocean Beach every Sunday," he said without looking up, somehow sensing her presence. His voice was different, softer, tired. "After my parents would spend Saturday tearing each other apart at whatever charity gala required their performance, she'd pack peanut butter sandwiches and terrible lemonade and we'd just sit." Camilla didn't know what to say. This wasn't part of their transaction. "She died believing I'd find what she had with my grandfather," Zachary continued, still looking at the photo. "Real partnership, real love. She didn't understand that our world doesn't work that way anymore, Everything's a merger. Everyone's an asset. Including me, Camila said quietly. Finally, he looked up. Something in his eyes made her chest tight. Especially you, I'm sorry for that. It was the first time he'd apologized for anything. The first time he'd looked at her like she was a person instead of a contract. And Camila, despite every wall she'd built, despite every number in her spreadsheet, felt something dangerous stir inside her chest. Your grandmother sounds like she was wonderful, she offered. She was the only one who saw me, Zachary said. Then, as if realizing he'd revealed too much, his expression shuddered closed again. I have a conference call. He stood, placed the photograph back on the shelf, and walked past her without another word. But something had shifted. The changes were small at first. Zachary started coming home for dinner occasionally, not eating with her but in the house at the same time. She'd hear him in the kitchen making tea, and sometimes she'd emerge to find him gone but a second cup left on the counter, still warm. An offering, a question mark. Then came the gala. The Whitmore Foundation's annual fundraiser was the social event of the San Francisco season, and Camilla's attendance was non-negotiable. Vivienne had sent a stylist with a selection of appropriate gowns, all of them designed to make Camila disappear into the background, all of them expensive tags on expensive invisibility. Camila wore her own dress instead, a deep emerald gown that her mother had helped her pick out, that fit her curves like it was painted on, that made her brown skin glow like she'd swallowed starlight. When she descended the stairs, Zachary was waiting in the foyer in his tuxedo. He looked up, and Camila watched his expression cycle through shock, something that might have been awe and then careful blankness. You look, he started, then stopped. Appropriate, Camila finished, unable to keep the edge from her voice. No, he said, and his voice was rough. You look like yourself. It was perhaps the kindest thing anyone in his family had ever said to her. At the gala, Vivienne's lips pressed into a thin line when she saw Camilla's dress, but said nothing. Richard raised his eyebrows and returned to his conversation, but Zachary did something unexpected. He kept his hand on the small of Camilla's back all evening. He introduced her to colleagues and friends not as my wife in that dismissive tone she'd grown used to, but as Camila, with something almost like pride in his voice. When an elderly tech mogul made a comment about affirmative action marriages, Zachary's hand tightened on her waist, and he excused them so quickly it made the man's champagne slosh. You didn't have to do that, Camila said when they were alone on the terrace, the party glittering behind them through the windows. Yes, I did. Zachary looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. I've been treating you like you're the problem with my life when you're the only honest thing in it. Everyone else wants something from me. You've been clear from day one about our arrangement. That's rare. I'm still here for the money, Camila reminded him, even as her heart started doing complicated things she couldn't afford. I know. Something that might have been disappointment flickered across his face. Doesn't mean I have to be cruel about it. From that night forward, their arrangement began to look different. Zachary started asking about her day over breakfast on weekends. Camila found herself staying up later, waiting to hear his car in the driveway. They started watching movies together on Thursday nights, his idea, surprisingly, a shared space in their separate lives. And Camila stopped updating her spreadsheet quite as religiously. We're at a turning point in this story, and I need you to make a choice too. Are you going to keep watching without subscribing? Hit that button right now. This story is about to get intense. Comment below, Team Camila or Team Zachary. Let me know where you stand. Month 17 arrived with the first flowers. Camila found them on her desk at work, a small bouquet of Trinidad hibiscus, the national flower of her parents' homeland. The card read simply, "For being patient with a fool, Z." Her colleagues crowded around, oohing and ahhing, and Camila felt her face heat. She texted him a simple thank you, and he responded with, "I pay attention more than you think." That weekend, he asked if she wanted to drive down the coast. Just a day trip, he said. No cameras, no performance. Just two people who lived in the same house, trying to figure out if they could be friends. They drove down Highway 1 in Zachary's Tesla, windows down, salt air whipping through the car. They stopped at a tiny seafood shack in Half Moon Bay, ate fish tacos sitting on the hood of the car, and talked about everything except their arrangement. Camila learned that Zachary had wanted to be a marine biologist as a kid, before his father convinced him that dreamers die poor. Zachary learned that Camila had taught herself to code as a teenager, building budgeting apps for immigrant families in her neighborhood. You could do that now, Zachary said, watching the waves crash against the shore. You have the resources, through me, through the foundation. That would make me dependent on you, Camila replied. I can't. I need to be able to walk away when the 5 years are up. Right, his jaw tightened, the 5 years. They drove home in silence, but it wasn't the cold silence of their early months. It was heavy with words neither of them knew how to say. That night, Camilla lay in her bed and did something she'd been avoiding for months. She let herself imagine a different ending to their story. One where the 5 years turned into 6, 7, a lifetime. Where the money didn't matter because something real had grown in the space between their transaction. Where Zachary looked at her every day the way he'd looked at her in that emerald dress. The fantasy was dangerous. The fantasy would break her heart. But she let herself have it anyway, just for one night. The shift in their relationship didn't go unnoticed. Vivienne made pointed comments at family dinners about not catching feelings for temporary arrangements. Richard pulled Zachary aside after one Sunday brunch, and Camilla didn't hear the conversation but saw Zachary's expression afterward, guilty, and closed off in a way that made her stomach hurt. But despite the external pressure, they continued to orbit closer. Zachary started working from home more often, setting up in the library while Camilla worked at the dining room table and they'd break for lunch together. He taught her to play chess. Badly, she was terrible at it, and she taught him to cook her mother's curry recipe. He started touching her more casual touches, a hand on her shoulder as he passed, fingers grazing hers when he handed her coffee. Each touch felt like a question mark. Each touch made the walls around her heart crack a little more. Month 23 arrived, and with it, Camilla's birthday. She hadn't mentioned it to anyone except Jasmine, but when she came downstairs that morning, the entire dining room was transformed. Balloons, not expensive designer ones, but regular, colorful drugstore balloons. A homemade banner that said "Happy Birthday Camilla" in handwriting she recognized as Zachary's. And a cake, slightly lopsided, clearly baked by someone who didn't know what they were doing, with candles already lit. Zachary stood next to the table in jeans and a t-shirt, looking nervous. I know we said this was just business, he started, but business partners acknowledge birthdays, so, happy birthday. Camilla felt tears prick her eyes. You made a cake. I tried to make a cake, he corrected. YouTube tutorials are misleading. It might be terrible. It was terrible. The frosting was grainy. The cake itself was dense enough to be a doorstop, and Camilla loved every bite of it. Make a wish, Zachary said, gesturing to the candles. Camilla closed her eyes and wished for something impossible, that this could be real. When she opened them, Zachary was watching her with an expression that made her heart stop. Camilla, he said quietly, I need to tell you something. Okay, she whispered. I know what our arrangement is. I know you're here for the payout. I know in 2 years and a bit, you'll take your money and build your life and I'll go back to being what I was before. But I need you to know. He paused, and for the first time since she'd met him, Zachary Whitmore looked genuinely afraid. I need you to know that somewhere in the middle of this transaction, I stopped pretending. And I don't know what to do with that. The room felt too small. The air felt too thin. Camilla's spreadsheet, her careful calculations, her walls, all of it crumbled. Zachary. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen, cursed softly. I have to take this, it's Tokyo, but can we talk later, please? Yes, Camilla said. even though her heart was racing, even though she didn't know what she would say. He answered the phone, stepping into his office, and Camilla stood alone in a room full of balloons, tasting frosting and fear in equal measure. She didn't know that later would never come. You feel that tension? That's where I need you to engage. Subscribe right now because what happens next will shatter everything. Comment below. Do you think Zachary really changed, or is this another game? Tell me where you're watching from. Now, hold on tight. The next 2 weeks were strange. Zachary seemed distracted, taking calls at odd hours, disappearing into his office for meetings he wouldn't explain. But when they were together, he was more present than ever, listening intently when she talked about work, asking questions about her nonprofit plans, looking at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. Camilla felt herself falling, not the careful, managed interest she'd allowed herself before, but something terrifying and complete. She'd catch herself thinking about him during meetings. She'd come home early just to have more time together. She started imagining how to tell her parents that she'd fallen for her arranged husband, how to explain to Jasmine that the business transaction had become something real. Month 24 in 2 weeks. Their second anniversary was approaching, the corporate milestone, Camilla thought wryly, the halfway point of their contract. She'd planned nothing, assuming they'd ignore it like they'd ignored every other manufactured milestone, but Zachary surprised her. I made reservations, he said on Saturday morning, 3 days before the actual date. That French place you mentioned wanting to try, I thought we could celebrate, or acknowledge, or whatever you want to call it. Celebrate works, Camilla said, and his smile made her feel like she'd swallowed sunshine. Monday arrived, their anniversary. Camilla left work early, stopped by the boutique downtown and splurged on a new dress, midnight blue, elegant, something that said, "I see you seeing me." She got her hair done, her nails. She felt ridiculous getting dressed up for a fake anniversary, but it didn't feel fake anymore. Nothing with Zachary felt fake anymore. The reservation was for 7. At 6:30, Camilla called an Uber to the restaurant. Zachary had said he'd meet her there, coming from a late meeting downtown. She arrived at 6:45, checked in with the host, asked to be seated. The restaurant was beautiful, low lighting, soft music, the kind of place where marriage proposals happened and life-changing decisions were made. She ordered a glass of wine and waited. 7 came and went, then 7:15, then 7:30. Camilla texted Zachary, "Everything okay?" No response. At 7:45 her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered, expecting Zachary, maybe calling from a colleague's phone. Instead, a woman's voice, young, shaking. "Is this Mrs. Whitmore?" "Yes," Camilla said slowly, her stomach dropping. "Who is this?" "My name is Madison Hayes. I'm a nurse at San Francisco General. Your husband listed you as his emergency contact." The wine glass slipped from Camilla's hand, shattering on the tile floor, red liquid spreading like blood. "What happened? Is he?" "He's okay," the nurse said quickly. "He was in a minor car accident, nothing serious, but we're keeping him for observation. You should come down." Camilla didn't remember paying for the wine, didn't remember the Uber ride to the hospital, didn't remember anything except the terror that had wrapped around her heart like a fist. Because somewhere in the last 2 years, Zachary Whitmore had stopped being a means to an end and had become everything that mattered. She ran through the emergency room doors, gave his name at the desk, followed the nurse down sterile hallways with fluorescent lights that hurt her eyes. The nurse stopped outside a room, and Camilla could see through the small window in the door. Zachary, sitting up in the hospital bed, looking fine, no visible injuries, talking on his phone. Relief flooded through her so powerfully, her knees almost buckled. Then she saw who was in the room with him. A woman, tall, blonde, model beautiful in the way Vivienne would call appropriate. She was sitting on the edge of Zachary's hospital bed, her hand on his leg, laughing at something he'd said on the phone. And as Camila watched, frozen in the doorway, Zachary ended his call and leaned forward to kiss the woman. Not a peck, not friendly. A kiss that spoke of familiarity, of intimacy, of everything Camila had been stupid enough to believe was real. The nurse was saying something, but Camila couldn't hear over the roaring in her ears. She pushed open the door and both of them turned. The woman's eyes widened. Zachary's face went white. "Camila," he said, and she'd never heard him sound like that, caught, guilty, panicked. "Who is this?" the blonde woman asked, standing up, smoothing her skirt. "This is Camila," Zachary said, and his voice was strange. "My wife." The woman's laugh was sharp. "Your wife, Zach, what the hell?" "You should go, Lauren," Zachary said, not looking at Camila. "We'll talk later." Lauren, the name clicked into place. Lauren Hastings, the lovely blonde girl Vivienne had mentioned all those months ago. The previous girlfriend, the appropriate one. "You told me the marriage was for show," Lauren said, and her voice was rising. "You told me it was just business, that you'd end it as soon as the inheritance cleared. You said she was just some girl your grandmother picked out, that she didn't matter." "Lauren, please," Zachary interrupted, finally looking at Camila, and the expression on his face made something inside her shatter completely. Because he looked sorry, but he didn't look surprised. He didn't look confused. He looked like a man who'd been caught doing exactly what he'd been doing all along. "The birthday," Camila said, and her voice sounded far away. "The flowers, the dinners, the coast, all of it." "Camila, let me explain." "How long?" she asked quietly. Zachary opened his mouth, closed it. "How long has she been back in the picture?" Camilla's voice was steady now, cold, distant. The numbers were returning, the calculations, the walls rebuilding themselves faster and higher than before. "We never really ended things," Zachary admitted, and each word was a knife. "We were on a break when I had to get married, but we always planned to get back together once you had your money," Camila finished. "Once the 5 years were up, once you didn't need me anymore." "It wasn't supposed to be like this," Zachary said, and the audacity of those words, the sheer selfishness of them, made Camila laugh. It was a sound like breaking glass. "You're right," she said. "It wasn't supposed to be like anything. It was supposed to be business. I was supposed to be smarter than this." She turned to leave, and Zachary grabbed her arm. "Camila, wait, please. I can explain." She looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. "Did you mean any of it? The things you said on my birthday?" He hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. "Let go of me," she said quietly. "Camila, let go of me, or I will scream for security." He released her like she'd burned him. Camila walked out of that hospital room with her head high, her shoulders straight, and made it all the way to the elevator before the tears came. She stood in that descending elevator, watching the numbers count down, 7, 6, 5, 4, and thought about how funny it was that she'd spent 2 years turning her life into numbers, and in the end, numbers couldn't protect her from this. She went home to the mansion. No, not home, never home, just the house where she'd been living a lie. She went to her wing, to her beautiful prison, and she opened her laptop. The spreadsheet was still there. 1,825 days, 10,958.9 per day. She'd made it through 742 days. That meant she'd earned approximately $8,131,302.80. It wasn't enough. No amount of money was enough to pay for this feeling, this hollowness in her chest, this betrayal that tasted like blood. She'd known the marriage was fake. She'd known, but she'd let herself forget. She'd let herself hope. And hope, as it turned out, was the most expensive thing of all. "Are you still with me? Because Camila needs you right now. She needs you to witness what happens next. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. This story isn't over. Comment below, what would you do in her position? Tell me where you're from. Now. Watch what happens when a woman who knows her worth decides she's done being invisible. Camila packed through the night. Not everything. She didn't want anything from this house, from this life. Just her own clothes, her laptop, her photographs. She called Jasmine at 2 a.m., explained in a voice empty of emotion, and Jasmine said simply, "I'm coming to get you." By dawn, Camilla was back in her old apartment in Oakland, the one she'd kept and sublet because some part of her had always known not to burn her bridges. Jasmine made tea. They sat on the floor because Camilla had sold her furniture, and Jasmine held her while she cried, really cried, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and wounded and young. "I'm such an idiot," Camilla sobbed. "No," Jasmine said fiercely. "He's a coward. You were brave enough to feel something real. That's never stupid." Zachary called 47 times that first day. Camilla didn't answer. He texted another 30 messages. She didn't read them. On day 2, he showed up at her apartment. She watched through the peephole as he knocked and called her name, but she didn't open the door. Eventually, he left. On day 3, the lawyers called. Zachary wanted to talk about the marriage. Camilla told them there was nothing to talk about. She'd left. The arrangement was over. She'd take her payout for the time served and walk away. "Mrs. Whitmore," the lawyer said gently, "if you leave before the 5-year mark, the prenup stipulates you forfeit the payment. You would leave with nothing." Camilla closed her eyes. Of course. Of course there was a clause for early termination. She'd been so focused on the ending number, she hadn't paid enough attention to the fine print. "How much for 2 years?" she asked. "I'm afraid it doesn't work that way. It's all or nothing." All or nothing. 5 years or $0. Camilla had walked away from $8 million. If she stayed 3 more years, she'd get $20 million. If she left now, she'd have nothing but student loans and a broken heart to show for the last 2 years of her life. The smart choice was obvious. Go back. Finish the contract, take the money. She'd been doing it as a performance anyway. What were 3 more years? Except she couldn't. She couldn't go back to that house and see him in the hallways. Couldn't sit across from him at mandatory dinners. Couldn't watch him pretend to care while planning his real life with his real love. The money wasn't worth that. Nothing was worth that. So Camilla made a choice. She called the lawyers back and told them to draw up dissolution papers. She was done. No payout, no negotiation, no looking back. "Are you certain?" the lawyer asked. "That's a significant amount of money to walk away from." "I'm certain," Camilla said. "Some things cost more than money." Zachary called her directly 10 minutes later. She answered this time, just to make it clear. "Camilla, please don't do this," he said, and he sounded wrecked. "I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve another chance, but we can figure this out." "There's nothing to figure out," Camilla said. Her voice was calm. She'd cried all her tears. "You showed me exactly who you are. I'm just sorry I didn't believe you sooner." "I meant what I said on your birthday," Zachary insisted. "I meant all of it. Lauren showing up, that was. It was complicated." "No, Zachary. It was simple. You wanted your money and your girlfriend. You wanted your inheritance and your real life, and I was convenient until I wasn't." Camilla looked out the window of her tiny apartment at the Oakland streets she'd grown up on. "I deserve better than convenient." "I know," he whispered. "I know you do. I'm so sorry." "I believe you're sorry," Camilla said. "I just don't care anymore. Sign the papers. Let me go." She hung up before he could respond. The papers were signed within a week. The marriage was dissolved. Camilla went back to her job, where everyone asked about her honeymoon glow disappearing, and she made vague comments about things not working out. She had dinner with her parents and lied about why she'd moved back to Oakland. She rebuilt her life, piece by piece, and tried not to think about the ghost of what might have been. 3 weeks after she left, Vivienne showed up at her apartment. Camilla almost didn't let her in, but curiosity won. "You left," Vivienne said, standing in Camilla's tiny living room like she'd been transported to another planet. "I did. Zachary is miserable." "Good," Camilla said and meant it. Vivienne studied her with those sharp eyes. You were supposed to be different from the others, more manageable. I was, Camilla replied, until you raised him to think people were transactions. Something flickered in Vivienne's expression, hurt maybe or recognition. Patricia would have liked you, she said finally. She would have said you had spine. She would have been right. Vivienne left without another word, and Camilla went back to rebuilding. This is where most stories would end, but not this one, because sometimes the biggest plot twists come after everyone thinks it's over. Stay subscribed, you need to see how this ends. Comment, are you Team Camilla? Drop your location below. Now hold on. 4 months passed. Camilla threw herself into work, into her community, into the nonprofit she'd always dreamed of. Without the 20 million, she had to start smaller. A community center in East Oakland, financial literacy classes for immigrant families, one-on-one budgeting help. She crowdfunded, applied for grants, worked nights and weekends. It was exhausting. It was real. It was hers. Jasmine helped her paint the community center walls bright yellow. Her parents volunteered to teach classes on navigating American banking systems. Her younger brother, home from college, helped set up their website. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, Camilla built something that mattered. She didn't think about Zachary, she didn't let herself. When memories surfaced, his laugh, his hands, the way he'd looked at her on her birthday, she pushed them down and focused on the numbers. Not the numbers from their marriage, but new numbers. 23 families helped this month. 15 people attended financial literacy class. 3 successful small business loan applications. Numbers that meant something. Then, on a Tuesday morning, exactly 6 months after she'd left the hospital, Zachary walked into her community center. Camilla was teaching a budgeting class to a group of young parents when she saw him through the window, standing on the sidewalk, staring at her hand-painted sign. He looked different, thinner, tired, less polished. His expensive suit didn't quite fit right, like he'd lost weight. His hair needed cutting. The class ended and Camilla stepped outside. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see it," Zachary said simply. "The thing you were going to build with the money. I wanted to see what I cost you." Camilla crossed her arms. "You didn't cost me anything. I built this myself." "I know." He looked at the center, at the families coming and going, at the bright walls and the laughter spilling out. "It's perfect. It's so you." "What do you want, Zachary?" "To apologize," he said. "Really apologize, not the selfish version I gave you at the hospital. You were right about everything. I was a coward. I wanted the money and the life my family expected and you to be convenient. And I destroyed something real because I was too scared to admit that it mattered." "It did matter," Camilla said quietly, "to me." "I know," his voice broke. "Lauren and I aren't together. We haven't been since the hospital. Turns out when you show someone who you really are, sometimes they don't like what they see either." Camilla felt a small, petty satisfaction at that. She wasn't proud of it, but she felt it. "I'm not here to ask for another chance," Zachary continued. "I know I burned that bridge. I just needed you to know that you were right and I was wrong and I'm sorry. And," he pulled an envelope from his jacket, "I wanted to give you this." "What is it?" "A check for $20 million. Camilla stared at the envelope like it was a snake. "I don't want your money." "It's not my money, it's yours. You earned it by putting up with me and my family for 2 years. The prenup was unfair. All or nothing shouldn't have been the terms. So I'm giving you what you deserve." "I walked away," Camilla said. "I made my choice." "You did, and it was the brave choice, but that doesn't mean you should suffer for it." Zachary held out the envelope. "Take it. Build more centers, help more families. Do what you were always meant to do. No strings, no contracts, no conditions, just what you earned." Camilla looked at the envelope, at him, at the center behind her. Part of her wanted to refuse on principle, but another part, the practical part that had gotten her through her entire life, knew what she could do with that money. How many families she could help, how many lives she could change. Why? She asked. Because watching you walk away taught me something, Zachary said. It taught me that some people's worth can't be quantified, and I spent 2 years trying to reduce you to numbers when you were always more than that. This is me admitting I was wrong. Camila took the envelope. This doesn't fix anything. I know, and I'm not coming back. I know that too, he smiled sadly. But maybe someday you'll think of me and not feel only anger. Maybe you'll remember that I tried at the end to do one thing right. He turned to leave, and Camila heard herself say, Zachary. He stopped, hope flashing across his face so quickly it hurt to see. Thank you, she said, for this and for letting me go. He nodded once and walked away. Camila stood on the sidewalk of her community center, holding an envelope worth $20 million, and felt lighter than she had in months. The money transformed everything. Camila expanded to 3 centers across Oakland. She hired staff. She created scholarship programs. She helped hundreds of families navigate systems designed to exclude them. She became the person she'd always meant to be, not because of Zachary Whitmore, but in spite of him. A year passed, then another. Camila dated casually, nothing serious. She had dinner with Jasmine every Tuesday without fail. She taught her parents to use smartphones and video called her brother at medical school. She built a life that was wholly, completely hers. And sometimes, late at night, she'd think about a man in a hospital bed, a birthday cake that tasted terrible, a drive down the coast with windows open and salt in the air. She'd think about what might have been if he'd been braver, if she'd been smarter, if timing and trust and love had aligned differently. But mostly, she thought about how she'd been brave enough to walk away from $20 million because she knew her worth. And then she'd been wise enough to take it back when it was offered without strings. She'd learned that love and money weren't mutually exclusive, but they also weren't the same. That you could want something beautiful and still refuse to settle for its shadow. That sometimes the best revenge was building the life you were always meant to live. 3 years after the divorce, Camila was invited to speak at a tech conference about financial inclusion. She accepted, prepared her speech, and didn't think about who else might be in attendance until she walked onto the stage and saw him in the 3rd row. Zachary, looking older, looking better, looking at her like she was still the only person in the room. She gave her speech. She was brilliant. She knew she was brilliant because she'd worked for it, earned it, become it. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Afterward at the reception, he approached carefully. That was incredible. Thank you, Camila said, and she could say it now without her heart breaking. I've been following your work, Zachary admitted. The centers, the programs, you're changing lives. I know, there was no arrogance in it, just truth. Can I buy you coffee? He asked. Just to talk, I don't know, try again at being human to each other. Camila considered, looked at this man who'd broken her heart and then given her the tools to fix it, who'd taught her what she wouldn't accept and, inadvertently, helped her discover what she would. Coffee, she agreed. As friends, as people who tried something once and it didn't work, nothing more. Nothing more, Zachary agreed. But the hope in his eyes suggested he was willing to wait for a something more that might never come. They got coffee. They talked about work, about family, about everything except the marriage. It was awkward and careful and surprisingly easy. When they parted ways, Zachary said, "Can we do this again?" "Maybe," Camila said, "if you're patient." "I've learned patience," he replied. "Losing you taught me that." Camila walked away from that coffee shop with a small smile. She didn't know if there would be a second coffee. She didn't know if time and growth could heal what betrayal had broken. She didn't know if she wanted it to. But she knew one thing for certain. She would never again let someone else's opinion of her worth define her. She'd calculated her value once in dollar signs. Now she measured it in lives changed, families helped, communities built. And that number, that beautiful, infinite number, was worth more than all the money in the world. So what did you think? Was this the ending you expected? Hit that subscribe button if this story moved you, and smash that like button if you believe in knowing your worth. Comment below. Would you have taken Zachary back, or would you have moved on? Tell me where you're watching from. I love hearing from all over the world. And remember, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming so phenomenally yourself that they realize what they lost. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next story.